I used to believe my marriage was built on trust. I never thought of myself as a naive man, but maybe I was. Maybe I was blind. Or maybe I just wanted to believe that the woman I loved, the mother of my child, would never betray me in the way she did. It all started at a children's party. A bright, cheerful day, filled with laughter, balloons, and the smell of sugary cake. My son, Ethan, was playing with his friends, running around in the backyard of his best friend's house. Parents stood in clusters, chatting, sipping soda, exchanging pleasantries about work and kids. Everything seemed so normal. Then came the jokes. A few of the other dads were laughing, nudging each other as they threw knowing glances at my wife, Megan. "Hey, Megan, you better be careful, your husband might catch on," one of them teased. Another chuckled. "Or maybe he already knows, and he's just letting it happen." The words hit me like a gut punch. My stomach twisted, but I forced a smile. "What are you guys talking about?" I asked, keeping my tone light. Megan rolled her eyes dramatically, waving a dismissive hand. "Oh, just dumb jokes," she said, giggling. "They're always teasing me about how I get all the special attention from the husbands when you're not around." I laughed along with them, but something didn't sit right. The way they looked at her. The way they smirked at me. It wasn't just playful teasing, it was something else. But I pushed it aside. I didn't want to be the paranoid husband, the one who made a scene at a kid's party. I should have listened to my instincts. Because 2 days later, Ethan came to me with words that shattered my world. "Daddy," he said, his little face scrunched up in confusion. "Why did another man come to our house when you weren't home?" He went into Mommy's room and locked the door. Everything inside me went cold. The world around me blurred. My breathing slowed, my heart pounded in my ears. "What did you say, buddy?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay calm. Ethan blinked up at me. "A man came. He was talking to Mommy, then they went to her room. She told me not to tell you, but I don't like secrets." I felt like I was going to be sick. My body moved before my mind could catch up. I grabbed my keys, stormed out of the house, and drove faster than I ever had. When I got home, I didn't knock. I didn't pause. I burst through the door. And there he was. Standing in my living room like he belonged there. The father of one of the kids from Ethan's kindergarten class. His shirt was unbuttoned. My wife was standing beside him, pale, wide-eyed, frozen. And before I could stop myself, before I could think, I hit him. My fist connected with his face before he even had the chance to react. A sickening crunch filled the air as his head snapped back, and he stumbled against the coffee table, knocking over a framed picture of our wedding day. I didn't care. I didn't care about anything in that moment except for the betrayal. The sheer audacity of it. He groaned, clutching his jaw, his eyes wide with shock. "What the hell, man?" he sputtered. "What the hell?" I echoed, my chest rising and falling in sharp, furious breaths. "You're asking me that?" Megan was already between us, pushing me back with shaking hands. "Stop it, please," she cried. "You don't understand." I barked out a laugh, cold, bitter, full of disbelief. "Oh, I understand perfectly." I turned to the man, my fingers twitching at my sides. "How long has this been going on?" Nothing happened. Megan shouted, but I could see the lie in her eyes. The way her gaze darted to the floor. The way she trembled, not with fear, but with guilt. Ethan's words rang in my head. "A man came to our house when you weren't home. He went into Mommy's room and locked the door." I took a step toward him again, fists clenched, but before I could do anything, Megan screamed, "Stop." I froze. Not because of her words. Not because of any sudden realization of morality. But because of the sound of sirens in the distance. She had called the police. 15 minutes later, I was in handcuffs. The cops arrived fast, faster than I thought possible. One of the neighbors must have heard the commotion and made the call. Or maybe it was Megan, covering her tracks, making sure I was the villain in this story. "You assaulted him in his own home," the officer told me as they shoved me into the back of the patrol car. My own home. My own home. I could see Megan standing in the doorway, arms wrapped around herself, watching them take me away. She didn't cry. She didn't try to stop them. She just let them take me. And that was the moment I realized something. I had already lost. The inside of a jail cell smells like sweat, metal, and something sour that clings to the back of your throat. I sat on the cold bench, my mind replaying everything over and over again. Megan. The man. The look in her eyes when she let them take me. She didn't fight for me. She didn't scream that it was a misunderstanding. She didn't beg them to let me go. She just watched. That hurt more than the betrayal itself. I wasn't in jail long. The other guy, David, that was his name, pressed charges for assault. But I had no prior record, so I was released within a day. I thought I could go home, try to make sense of it all. I was wrong. When I pulled up to my house, my key didn't work. At first, I thought maybe Megan had locked the deadbolt from the inside. But then I noticed something else. My clothes were scattered across the lawn. Boxes. Bags. My entire life, thrown outside like trash. And standing in the doorway, arms crossed, was Megan. "You can't be here," she said. Her voice was steady, cold. I blinked at her, still gripping my useless house key. What are you doing?" "You assaulted someone," she said. "I won't have you around Ethan like this." I laughed. Actually laughed. A bitter, hollow sound. "You mean the man you've been screwing behind my back? That guy?" She flinched. Just a little. But I caught it. "You need to leave," she repeated. The rage inside me was white-hot, but I swallowed it down. "Where's Ethan?" "He's inside," she said quickly, like she was afraid I'd try to see him. "I told him you're taking some time away." I stepped closer. "You told him that?" My voice was shaking. "You think you get to rewrite the story? You think you can just erase me?" She didn't answer. That's when I saw the small pile near the trash can. My documents. My birth certificate, my social security card, my passport, charred, the edges curling from fire. She hadn't just thrown me out. She had erased me. I took a step back, exhaling slowly. I couldn't stay. Not like this. I picked up what little I could carry. One bag, a few clothes, a wallet that thankfully still held my ID and some cash. I turned back to Megan one last time, shaking my head. "You just made the worst mistake of your life." Then I walked away. I didn't have a home. I didn't have a job, I worked remotely, but Megan had locked me out of my accounts. I didn't even have my documents. She had taken everything. I spent my first night sleeping in my car, parked behind a gas station on the edge of town. The next morning, I used the last of my cash to buy a burner phone and a cheap breakfast. As I sat in that grimy booth, staring at my reflection in the window, I realized something. I was homeless. Megan had backed me into a corner. She had taken my son, my house, and my identity. She thought I would break. But she didn't know me as well as she thought she did. I wasn't going to break. I was going to burn her whole world down. First things first, I needed a way to rebuild. I couldn't get new documents without an address, and I couldn't get an address without money. So, I did the only thing I could, I worked. I picked up day labor jobs, construction sites, moving companies, anywhere that paid in cash. I kept my head down, saved every dollar, and started making calls. Old friends. Contacts. Anyone who might be able to help. Eventually, I got lucky. A former colleague, Mike, ran a small cybersecurity firm. When he heard what happened, he offered me a deal. "You don't have an office, but you've got a brain. Help me with a few high-profile clients, and I'll pay you under the table until you get back on your feet." It was my ticket out. Within a month, I had enough to rent a tiny apartment. Nothing fancy, just a one-room place with a mattress on the floor. But it was mine. Then, I started working on payback. The first thing I did was hire a lawyer. Megan had filed a restraining order against me, painting me as a violent man. That's why I couldn't see Ethan. That's why I was completely cut off. My lawyer, a shark of a man named Garrett, reviewed the case and smirked. "This is weak," he said. "She's trying to keep you away from your son, but there's no real evidence of abuse. We can fight this." Fight we did. It took 2 months, but the restraining order was lifted. The second Megan got the news, she tried a new tactic, claiming I was unstable and financially unfit to be a father. But she wasn't expecting what came next. By the time we went to court, I had a stable income, a place to live, and evidence that she had destroyed my documents to keep me from fighting back. I didn't just win visitation. I won custody. Ethan was mine. But I wasn't done yet. Megan had taken everything from me. Now, it was my turn. The day I walked into court and walked out with full custody of Ethan was the day Megan's world began to fall apart. She hadn't expected me to fight back. She thought she had me buried, penniless, homeless, a ghost with no way to reclaim my life. But she had underestimated me. When the judge ruled in my favor, Megan's face twisted into something ugly. "This isn't over," she hissed as I passed her in the hallway. I smiled. "No, it's not. Because taking Ethan was just the beginning. Now, it was time to dismantle everything she had left." Megan had moved on fast, too fast. The ink on our divorce papers wasn't even dry before she was living with David, the man she had cheated on me with. The same man I had punched in my living room. It wasn't about love. Megan needed someone to take care of her. She had always been good at playing the victim, making herself look like the fragile, devoted mother who just happened to be in a toxic marriage. But I knew the truth. And now, so would David. A little digging uncovered what I suspected: Megan had a long history of infidelity. David wasn't the first, just the latest. Armed with proof, I sent an anonymous email to his work. A few photos. A few screenshots of texts Megan had sent to another man while she was still sleeping in David's bed. 3 weeks later, he moved out. Megan was alone. Megan had been smart when she kicked me out. She had drained our shared bank account before I could touch a dime. She thought she was set. But she had made one crucial mistake: she didn't know how to survive on her own. Without David paying the bills, Megan started struggling. I saw the signs: her car was gone, replaced by an older model. The house was on the market. And then, the best part. I had kept quiet about some of the financial tricks she pulled during our marriage. The hidden accounts. The cash withdrawals. The unpaid taxes she had filed under my name. But now that I was stable, I handed every piece of evidence over to my lawyer. A full audit followed. She owed thousands in back taxes, penalties, and legal fees. She was drowning. The last step wasn't about revenge. It was about showing her that she never broke me. I moved out of my tiny apartment into a real home, a place where Ethan had his own room, a backyard, and a future. I expanded my work, building a small but successful cybersecurity business. I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. And Megan? She was barely hanging on. I saw her one last time, outside the courthouse after she lost her appeal for custody. She looked different, tired, bitter, broken. She tried to smile. You really hate me that much? I looked at her, at the woman who had tried to destroy me. No, I said. I just love my son more than you ever did. Then I walked away. With Ethan by my side, I booked 2 one-way tickets. We were leaving the country. A fresh start. A new life. And Megan? She would never see us again. For a while, I thought it was over. I had won custody of Ethan, rebuilt my life, and left Megan in the ruins of her own making. She was out of my life, just a ghost of bad memories I tried to forget. But ghosts don't just disappear. And Megan? She was the kind that haunted you when you least expected it. It started with small things. A blocked number calling my phone late at night. Silence on the other end. Then, a message slipped under my apartment door one morning. You can't keep him from me. I hadn't told Megan where we lived. No one had. That's when I knew, she was watching us. I should have gone to the police right away. But I was stupid. I thought she was just desperate, lashing out. I had no idea how far she was willing to go. It was a Saturday. A normal day. Ethan and I had planned to go to the park, like we always did. He was already at the door, his little hands struggling to tie his shoelaces. Daddy, can we get ice cream after? Of course, buddy, I said, ruffling his hair. Then the doorbell rang. I checked the peephole. No one was there. I frowned, opening the door just a crack. A hand shot out, shoving it open. And there she was. Megan. She looked awful, disheveled hair, sunken eyes, like she hadn't slept in days. But there was something worse in her expression. A manic determination. Where is he? She demanded, trying to push past me. I blocked the door. Get out of here, Megan. He's my son too. Her voice cracked. You think you can just take him and disappear? Ethan peeked out from behind me. Mommy? The moment she saw him, her whole body tensed. Ethan, baby, come here. Ethan hesitated. He didn't run to her. And that hesitation, it shattered something inside her. Megan's face twisted in fury. You poisoned him against me, she spat. I didn't have time to react before she lunged. Straight for Ethan. I barely managed to grab her wrist before she could touch him. Get out. I roared. She fought. Kicked. Screamed. Ethan was crying. And then, sirens. A neighbor must have called the cops, because within seconds, officers were pulling Megan off me, dragging her away as she shrieked like a wild animal. You won't win, she screamed. I'll never let you take him from me. I held Ethan close as she disappeared into the back of a squad car. His tiny body trembled against mine. Daddy, he whispered. Is Mommy going to jail? I swallowed hard. I don't know, buddy. But one thing was certain. Megan had just crossed a line. And I was going to make sure she never got another chance. Megan spent the weekend in jail. I hoped, prayed, that this would be the end of it. That she'd finally understand she had lost, that her life was over if she kept pushing. But Megan? She wasn't wired that way. She didn't give up. She doubled down. It came on a Wednesday morning. A thick envelope slid under my apartment door. At first, I thought it was another one of Megan's pathetic messages, another empty threat, another desperate attempt to claw her way back into our lives. But when I saw the legal seal, my stomach dropped. I tore it open. Petition for custody modification. Megan was suing me. She was trying to take Ethan back. I met with my lawyer, Garrett, that same afternoon. He skimmed the paperwork, shaking his head. She's claiming emotional distress, he said. That you manipulated Ethan into rejecting her. I clenched my jaw. That's complete BS. Garrett smirked. Of course it is. But this isn't about facts. It's about Megan making you spend money, dragging you through hell, and making herself look like the victim. I exhaled slowly, trying to stay calm. What are our chances? Garrett leaned back in his chair. She has no job. No stable housing. And she was just arrested for attacking you. The judge isn't going to hand her a kid. That should have reassured me. But I knew Megan. She wasn't playing to win. She was playing to ruin me. When I walked into that courtroom, I expected Megan to look beaten down. Defeated. Instead, she was smiling. And when I saw why, my blood ran cold. Sitting beside her was a high-powered attorney, not some cheap public defender, but a shark. The kind that cost thousands per hour. My mind raced. Megan was broke. Drowning in debt. So who the hell was paying for her lawyer? Then I saw him. Sitting in the back row. Watching me. David. Her ex-lover. The same man I had already ruined. The same man who had left her. And now. He was backing her. Helping her come after my son. I clenched my fists. They had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. Because I wasn't just going to fight them. I was going to destroy them both. David. I hadn't seen him since he ran out on Megan months ago, after I sent proof of her cheating to his job. I thought he was done with her, thought he had moved on. But there he was. Backing her. Funding her. Trying to take my son away from me. I met his eyes from across the courtroom, and he smirked. That smug, self-satisfied grin of a man who thought he had the upper hand. He was wrong. Because I wasn't going to let him win. Megan's lawyer came out swinging. She's a devoted mother, he argued. She made mistakes, yes, but her son deserves to have both parents in his life. The defendant has systematically alienated the child from his mother, poisoning him against her. I sat there, biting my tongue. Poisoned him against her. She was the one who abandoned him. She was the one who burned my documents and threw me into the streets. She was the one who broke into my apartment and tried to take him by force. And now she was the victim. Garrett leaned over. Relax, he murmured. Let them talk. We'll bury them later. So I sat back. And I waited. When it was time for my lawyer to speak, he didn't waste a second. We have a restraining order against the plaintiff, Your Honor, Garrett said, standing tall. Filed after she attempted to physically take the child from the defendant's home. The judge frowned. Is this true, Ms. Reynolds? Megan's lawyer cleared his throat. My client was acting out of desperation, Your Honor. She was misled into believing her son was in danger. Garrett cut him off. Desperation. She was arrested. The police report clearly states that she physically assaulted my client in an attempt to remove the child. The judge flipped through the file. Megan looked pale. Then Garrett went for the kill. Your Honor, my client has provided a stable home, a steady income, and a safe environment for Ethan. The plaintiff, on the other hand, has no job, no home, and no way to support a child. Silence. Megan shifted in her seat. Then the judge spoke. For now, custody remains unchanged. We will reconvene in 2 weeks for further review. I had won round 1. But the war wasn't over. As I was leaving the courthouse, I felt a hand grip my arm. David. I turned slowly, keeping my face blank. You think you've won? He sneered. I smiled. No. But I will. He chuckled. Megan's not the same woman you left behind. She's smarter now. And this time, she's got me in her corner. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. You sure about that, David? His smirk faltered. I leaned in. Because I know Megan. And she'll burn you down the second she thinks it'll save herself. I patted his shoulder and walked away. And sure enough, I was right. Megan was desperate. And desperate people, they always make mistakes. I knew she would self-destruct eventually. I just didn't expect it to happen so fast. Because just 3 days after our court hearing, David called me. It was late. I was putting Ethan to bed when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. But something told me to pick up. I stepped into the hallway and answered. Yeah. At first, silence. Then a heavy sigh. It's David. I raised an eyebrow. You've got a lot of nerve calling me. I know, he muttered. And I wouldn't, but we need to talk. I leaned against the wall. About what? A long pause. Then he exhaled, almost defeated. About Megan. David and I met in a diner off the highway the next night. Neutral ground. He looked wrecked. Eyes sunken. Unshaven. Hands shaking slightly as he stirred his coffee. So? I said, crossing my arms. What's so important that you called me? He ran a hand down his face. Megan played me. I smirked. No kidding. No, you don't understand. He shook his head. She told me you were dangerous. That you abused her. That you manipulated Ethan into hating her. I laughed. Actually laughed. And you believe that? His jaw tightened. She showed me things. Fake texts. Photos of bruises, old ones from an accident, but she told me they were from you. That wiped the smirk off my face. I knew Megan was a liar. A manipulator. But this? She had gone that far. David looked down at his coffee. I was an idiot. But after court, I started noticing things. She was using me. Draining my accounts. Lying about where she was going. And then. He hesitated. I leaned in. Then what? His hands clenched into fists. She tried to set me up. David's voice was low, like he still couldn't believe what he was saying. She told me to plant drugs in your apartment. My blood turned to ice. She said if the cops found something, you'd lose custody, he continued. Said it was the only way to fix things. I gritted my teeth. Megan had always been reckless, but this was criminal. David looked at me, shame in his eyes. I told her no. And that's when I realized, she was going to do it herself. With or without me. I exhaled slowly. She wasn't just dangerous anymore. She was unhinged. I stood up, pulling out my phone. What are you doing? David asked. I met his eyes. Ending this. The next day, I went straight to my lawyer. I told him everything. The fake abuse claims. The planted evidence scheme. And with David's sworn testimony, we finally had enough to do what I should have done months ago. We took Megan to court, not for custody. For criminal charges. And this time, she didn't walk away. Because when she saw David testifying against her, when she realized she was completely alone, she broke. She admitted everything. The lying. The fraud. The staged abuse photos. The attempt to frame me. And when the judge handed down the sentence, 3 years in prison, it was over. Megan was gone. For good. I stood outside the courthouse, breathing in the crisp air. David walked up beside me, hands in his pockets. So. I guess this is it. I nodded. Yeah. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then he sighed. I'm sorry, man. I was an idiot. I looked at him. And for the first time since this all started, I didn't hate him. You were, I admitted. But at least you fixed your mistake. A small, humorless smile crossed his face. Guess that's something. He turned to leave but stopped. Take care of Ethan. I will. And with that, he walked away. I exhaled, closing my eyes. For the first time in years. There was no more battle to fight. No more war to win. Just me, my son. And a new life waiting for us.